almost hidden among the rugged hills and valleys of northern Uganda. There's a place so remote, its beauty has gone almost unnoticed. Here, a small group of people struggle to survive and preserve their culture. While nearby, there's an effort to reverse the disastrous effects that decades of unrest and poaching have had on the wildlife population. But there is hope here. Welcome to Uganda. Welcome to Inside Africa. Our destination for this journey is isolated. This small plain will be by far the easiest way to reach it. It takes us about 2 hours to fly from Kampala to the Kidepo Valley National Park. That same trip by car takes 12 hours on variable roads. From the air, we can see the vast, untouched wilderness of this area, near the borders of Uganda, South Sudan and Kenya. And shortly after landing, we're treated to the first of many stunning sunsets. We begin early the next morning, on the edge of the Kidepo Valley National Park. This truck takes us on a dirt road to the foothills of Morungol. Here, we meet our guides, who will take us up the mountain to remote villages where one of the smallest ethnic groups in Africa lives, a people called the Ik. The Ik leaders estimate there are about 11,000 Ik people, living in small villages of several hundred people each.
The name of this village is called Palakan.
Our guide Hilary Lokwang is one of the relatively few Ik who speak English.
Our lifestyle, the way you see, it's different from other communities. It's just very unique, even in terms of culture. Even the way we talk, it's different. Just because we have been living in an isolation, we have not been with other communities.
In fact, they've spent much of their history on the move. According to tribal legend, the Ik lived in Ethiopia hundreds of years ago. They migrated first to Kenya and then to northern Uganda, settling in the Kidepo Valley. But in the 1950s, their home was designated as part of the Kidepo Valley National Park, so they moved again to Mount Morungol, just outside of the national park. The Ik are traditionally hunters and gatherers, but because they can no longer hunt in the park, and because of cattle raids by rival tribes, the Ik now largely rely on subsistence farming. Maize is their staple crop. Rival tribes continue to pose a threat to the Ik, which is why they build large walls with secret exits around their villages. Life is largely the same as it always has been for the Ik. Family life includes polygamy and little education for children.
So what is also very unique with the Ik don't have friends among themselves. They behave like they are all related. They are not friends, but they behave as if they are related, all of them.
We continue traveling up the mountainside to another Ik village. The Ik are welcoming to visitors, and we stay as the sun goes down. That's when we meet this woman, preparing a dish of maize and water. We ask who she's making the food for.
She's making it for family members.
And the family will eat in the traditional Ik way.
First, when they serve food, they first serve for men. Then they now give for children. And then the balance remains for the rest of the household.
If there's not food enough, the women do not eat. The Ik go to sleep after the meal, and head to their fields first thing in the morning. When we wake up, we go to meet one of the village elders.
This mountain has helped us, and right now we are secure, because when you're on top of the mountain, you can see someone coming at a far distance.
This elder says the Ik culture must be preserved, and the key to that is maintaining the Ik language, which no rival tribes understand.
Our language is very unique. We only understand our language, and for others, they don't understand our language.
There is an outside effort to understand and preserve the Ik language. To find out more, we leave the village and head back down the mountain. From there, we drive 2 hours on hilly dirt roads until we get to the home of an American linguist.
Toimena inikai gwe kidya bie washik. Inikesugot.
Terrell Schrock is working with 3 generations of Ik, trying to learn the language and create a comprehensive English-Ik dictionary. He's already written a grammar for the language.
Ik has implosives and ejectives, which are totally foreign to Europeans. Implosives are made by sucking air in, like bah and da. And ejectives are made by popping air out from your voice box, like ka and sa. Oh.
He's found evidence in the language that supports the Ik legend that the Ik people are from Ethiopia. He's also found evidence that links their unique language to people as far away as southern Egypt,
which suggests a borrowing situation between those ancient languages and could even point to older stages, to older ancestral languages that we really don't have a lot of information about.
Schrock hopes the Ugandan government will provide funding so Ik can be taught in schools. Otherwise, he's not sure the language will survive, especially as the Ik population shrinks.
It's like a museum. It's a storehouse of information, of historical information, cultural information, ecological information. When a language like that dies, you could liken it to maybe like a library burning down. You know, losing a window into the past that will never appear again in the future and can never be recovered.
Coming up, we head into the Kidepo Valley National Park as park leaders try to save and rebuild the wildlife population. Welcome back to Inside Africa in Uganda. As we explore the remote northeast corner of this country, our journey takes us into one of Africa's most secluded national parks, and the water that gives it life.
We are in a point called Narus permanent wetland, which is the heart of the national park.
The tribal warfare in the 1980s and 90s that drove many away from this area included fights over local control of this water.
Today, it is a point which supports a lot of the congregation of animals that live in this valley.
Animals that are being given another chance to thrive here. Our guide drives us further into Kidepo Valley National Park, a 1,400 square kilometer park on Uganda's border with South Sudan and Kenya. With the hills of Mount Morungol on the horizon, this savanna landscape is home to nearly 500 bird species and 77 different mammals. The largest population of mammals, and arguably the most impressive, is the buffalo.
The herd we have can reach over 1,000.
And in the whole park, it is estimated that Kidepo Valley has got a population of over 10,000 buffaloes.
Water in the Narus Valley keeps the plants healthy and always growing, which gives the buffalo plenty to eat, and they graze day and night.
According to tourists who have moved all over Africa, they have been giving a comment that in the whole of the continent, Kidepo has got the largest population of buffaloes. And even in Uganda, Kidepo still takes the lead of being the highest in the buffalo population.
Buffalo are one of Kidepo's success stories, but other animals are harder to find. We get back on the road in search of a species of giraffe that was nearly wiped out here 20 years ago. On the way, we see large populations of Jackson's hartebeests and elephants which are thriving here in the Narus Valley. It takes some time before we get our first look at the giraffes. We decide to do it from the air and from a distance because our presence seems to be making them nervous. But we continue to follow our guide through the grass and get to a part of the park where he hopes we will be successful. That's where we find them. A male that our guide says is about 20 years old, with several females between 8 and 10 years old.
What we see at the background is giraffes, which is the species called the Rothschild giraffe.
A species that was healthy, with a growing population when the park opened in the 1960s. But unrest and political instability created an environment where poachers, including those from across the border in South Sudan, could come to the park and kill.
Those people could get into the park and poach the giraffes for purposes of their parts. One, the tail, which they used for making the necklaces, which could be worn by men and ladies. And then the other purpose was meat. And the third one was the skin. They could use it as their mattresses.
Philip says the effects were devastating to a giraffe population that reached a high point of 400.
By about 1997, the population of the giraffes in Kidepo Valley National Park had drastically reduced to about 3 in total.
Beginning that year, Kidepo Rangers increased security to cut down on poaching and translocated a handful from Kenya. In less than 20 years, Philip says the population has risen from just 3 to 40. 20 years from now, rangers hope to have more than 100 giraffes here. The size and the natural resources of the park mean the population can keep growing.
Really, the population is coming up, and we are more than sure that it will continue increasing.
Johnson Masareka is the chief warden at Kidepo. And while the animal population is growing here, the number of human visitors to the park is relatively small.
I don't think we have reached the optimum number that would wish to have in this park per year. 5,000 is much low. We hope that one time we can go to about 20,000, and for me that will be more or less an optimum number.
Part of what makes Kidepo so beautiful, its secluded, rugged landscape, is what makes it difficult to visit. From Kampala, Kidepo is a 12-hour drive. The alternative is an expensive 2-hour plane ride. Violent conflict has also plagued the park in the past.
With the security now, people are free to travel anywhere in the park anytime. The roads have very much improved. If you move on the road between Kidepo and Kampala right now, it's either tarmac or very good maram roads, and it now takes less time to get to Kidepo than it used to in the past.
Park leaders are also hoping to double the number of people who can spend the night here, from the current 100-bed capacity They're trying to sell visitors on the park's beauty and the wildlife that lives here.
This uniqueness, you may not find all those species in a single park at the same time. And that is a big attraction. This to me is the Ngorongoro of Uganda. And I would really invite people that have not been here, that they don't know what they are missing.
Coming up, we travel from the wetlands of Narus to the dry Kidepo Valley and its river of sand. Welcome back to Inside Africa in Uganda. It's early morning in the Kidepo Valley National Park. We begin our day in the lush savanna of the park's Narus Valley, where giraffes and lions are part of the ever-growing wildlife population. But not all of the park is so rich with water and green grass for hungry animals to graze. We head to the other side of the park, to the Kidepo Valley. And once here, what appears at first glance to be a road is actually a small river. The rains have lasted longer than usual this year, so we find mud where there would usually be sand. As we travel further into the valley, we reach the much larger Kidepo River. Again, looking more like a dirt road, this is a river with no water.
Since it is a seasonal river, the water which comes is so rapid to the extent that this river cannot contain it for a good number of days. It only runs for a few hours, about 2 to 3 hours.
Our park guide explains heavy rain makes this river flash flood. The water flows through the park and into South Sudan. But only for a few hours. Then it's gone, leaving a river of sand as wide as 50 meters in some parts.
You find that underground the sun, there is still water which exists there. And this can be dug out by some animals, say for example baboons. When they find that here is dry, they can dig out until they get water. The same also applies to the elephants.
But not all the water in this valley vanishes. We travel about 11 kilometers north and walk down a path between overgrown grass and shrubs. Here, in an almost hidden location, we find something unexpected.
Welcome to the hot springs. When we arrive here, anyone is always asked to touch and guess the temperature.
The water in this small collection of pools, called the Kanangarok Hot Springs, is around 50 degrees Celsius. Our guide says the springs were formed by ancient volcanic activity.
It erupted in a liquid form called magma. When this magma got exposed to the wind, it solidified to become rocks. Now from where it left, there was a hole which became the source of this water.
From this spot, it's a short walk to another landmark.
Here we are on the international border between Uganda and South Sudan.
There are no fences here, so animals routinely cross the border into a similar park in South Sudan. However, our guide says from the 1960s through the 90s, when the park saw serious declines in some animal populations because of poaching, many of the hunters gained access to the park through this border.
We have reinforced law enforcement by recruiting more rangers and also asking government to deploy the UPDF, that is the Uganda People's Defense Forces, along the border.
It worked. Here in the Kidepo Valley, where there's less water and grass than across the park in the Narus Valley, we find animals like zebras.
Animals concentrate in this area when it is wet, but when it dries, most of the animals get to Narus Valley.
We go in search of one of the animals who can stay here. The ostrich.
Roughly, we have between 300 to 700 ostriches, and they concentrate much of the time in Kidepo Valley. Reason being, this valley is open and it has got short vegetation.
Ostriches usually form flocks of 20 or more. It takes some time, but we finally find a male traveling alone. Our guide says he's likely looking for mates.
Sometimes what we see is a kind of marriage called polygyny. You find one male, pink in color, with more than 20 females, always leading and females coming from behind.
In addition to the ostrich, many of the park's other birds, including most of the birds of prey, live here in the Kidepo Valley. Before we leave, we find an elephant, which is somewhat unusual in the valley during dry season. But this year, rain continued for weeks after the end of the traditional wet season in October.
It has maintained some of the animals that used to move away during the dry season. Reason being, there has been plenty of grass and plenty of water. That's why we still have some animals in the Kidepo Valley.
Kidepo is a park rich with natural resources and a growing wildlife population. The challenge for park administrators is drawing visitors to this isolated part of Uganda. But they're determined to both share Kidepo's beauty and to preserve it as well. That's it for this week on Inside Africa. Find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and visit our website, cnn.com/Inside Africa.